Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Healing Overflow with Dr. Toy. I'm your host, Dr. Toy, and you came back. That means you like what you're hearing and what you're seeing, and I so appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and thank you for sharing. Also, don't forget about our Ask a Therapist segment. Y'all have been writing some really good questions. You know, when I start getting a lot of questions, I'll have a whole Ask a Therapist episode. And so I can't wait to do that. But ask your questions to the therapist. That's me again, right there in the Qualtrics link. That's anonymous, so I don't have to know who you are. But if you want that Starbucks gift card, you got to leave your email address. Y'all, I got to get straight to my guest because I'm so excited to have her today. We've been talking about this topic and we have been talking about getting her on the podcast. And finally, the stars aligned or the moons or whatever's supposed to align, but she's here. And I'm super grateful to have her. This is Dr. Yodit Betru, my friend, my sorority sister, my colleague, definitely someone has been a great help and mentor, but just a buddy through the whole entire system in the collegiate system. And so I'm so proud of her because this girl went out and wrote a book, okay? She wrote a book. Y'all see all my tabs in there. I'm excited to dig into it. But I need y'all to put your hands together for Dr. Yodit Betru. You hear them cheering?
I hear it. It's quite
y'all
nice.
Going crazy.
Please, everyone.
They got to calm down.
We have things to get to.
Well, I want to jump right into it. Not dump into it, but I want to jump right into it. And just talk about who you are. Like, you're a director of the MSW program, you're an author, you're a mama, you're a spouse, you're all those things.
That's true.
And I just want you to just talk about, like, who is Yodit Betru?
Yeah. Big existential question. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
So I think about myself, my professional self, and then my private self, right? So what's nice about social work and what I often mention is that I think who we are leads us into this profession. And so from that perspective, I'm pretty aligned. So I am first an immigrant. I tell folks I'm from Ethiopia. So that's my origin story. I came to the U.S. when I was 9. I didn't speak English. English is my second language, actually. And so I learned English here. My dad was a professor. I'm sorry, he wasn't a professor yet. My dad was getting his doctorate in Oklahoma, in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So my first U.S. experience was in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So it's a particular kind of U.S. experience. It's deeply sort of shaped who I am and how I've adapted to what it means to live in this country. And I come from folks who are educators, so I think that's a big part of my story. I always say I come from people. People just don't sprout up. It's not like I just popped up ready to write a book out of nowhere. I come from a long line of people who care about education, activists. My father was an activist and involved in a lot of the movements in Ethiopia. And so, and then it became difficult for us to go back. The political climate wasn't safe for him. So we actually were political refugees here.
Oh, my goodness.
Yep. And so we had that experience, that particular U.S. experience, all the while just like going to school and trying to figure out what it means to be here and living through the kinds of things that I think that I wanted to address when I became a social worker. I didn't have the language for it then, but I kind of knew. And like the things that were available to us then were like, you could be a lawyer, you could be a doctor, you could maybe be a psychologist, but no one had talked about social work as a route. So, I didn't know that was even a possibility. But the experiences of coming through sort of an immigration experience in the U.S. Really shaped me. So that's a big part of my growing up. And then I went to college here. I got my bachelor's in psychology because I didn't know social work existed.
We're going to get to that. Because
upsetting.
I was in the same boat.
Right.
But go ahead.
And then I got my MSWs consecutively. So I got those two together, and I was out and practicing at a whole 23. But you couldn't tell me I didn't know nothing.
You knew everything.
Are you kidding?
Don't you want to give refunds back to the clients you had?
Yeah,
like,
you were I was so passionate about.
Here's your money back. I'm very sorry.
I did some nice genograms. Oh my God, they were so good. Yes. So I did that. I was getting supervised for my licensure all along the way. So then I became a licensed clinical social worker, and then I just started seeing social problems that were the same people were experiencing in different systems, because I did housing, I was in the jail system, child welfare, and people had all this trauma. We didn't even name it as trauma back then. I don't know if you remember.
I don't know if we knew what it was.
We didn't know. I was like, they're telling me something is happening to them. That is not being addressed. That's not funded. So when I was a manager for transitional housing, my payments and what HUD gave us money for was housing units and case management. And that did not mean we really talked to you about why you became unhoused. It was just like, let's get you situated in a better place, and then hopefully somebody else can take care of that. So I was like, I don't think we're doing this well.
Fixing the symptoms, but not going to the root of the issue. Sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
So that's when I decided to get my doctorate, and specifically a DSW. A lot of my students ask me about that, rather than a PhD. And a DSW is for clinical social workers, or it can be. Mine was at Penn. And I worked full time and got my doctorate at the same time, and then came out at the other end still alive.
You made it through.
I made it through. I wrote a case management manual, actually, that was trauma-informed, which is actually what I used to help me with the writing process. And then after that, I was planning on going back in the field, but there was a unique position in the university, so I became a professor.
Yay.
And then here we are.
That's it. And that's how we met, which is a wonderful, beautiful story.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
How we met in the hallways.
Met my
of
girl
the
in the
university.
hallways.
Yes.
And I was like, you're going to be the program director.
Right. She's like, come here, let me talk. And that's really, and we talk off camera so much about how we admire one another and how we've helped each other, especially as Black faculty, coming through the academy. And it's a different horse of a different color, and probably a different podcast. But I'm so curious as to why social work for you. And I heard that, your dad was an activist and probably still is. I don't know if that ever quite goes away out of their blood. But did that have a large influence? And you said that you saw social problems going on. So, like, how did you happen upon social work and say, that is the career for me?
Yeah. I don't think I could articulate that my dad was an activist until later. I saw legacies of that. He was an educator. I always knew that he was an educator. I had no plans on being an educator, by the way. It's the funniest story to me that I'm an educator.
No, thank you.
I was like, no. I think for me, I went to go look more into psychology because I was intimidated by the clinical psych. And so I thought, okay, what can I do? And I stumbled on something that said social workers could become therapists. So I went to go talk to the MSW, the dean of the MSW program at the school that I was at. And I came out of that conversation enrolled in the program. He printed out an acceptance letter, and he looked at my stuff, and he's like, yeah, you can start this fall. I was like, I think I got into graduate school.
I'm here, I'm in?
Yes. I had no idea what it was for a very long time, and actually would distance myself from the profession and say, I'm a psychotherapist. I don't do social work.
Yeah.
And to now being and making sure that folks really understand that I'm a social worker. I'm so proud of the legacy and the work that we do because it's a really important discipline. And it's a discipline of professionals. It's not volunteer folks. So you'll see me really be very adamant about that in the book. That we're not people who, this isn't a vocation. This is a profession.
It's a profession.
And
it's a calling.
It's a calling.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
It's a gut pull. If you hear me talk about my story, you'll see the passion that I have for social work and that Dr. Betru has for social work. And I always tell my students I felt the pull, like I needed to do this. It felt like it was calling me, like, Toya, come here. And I had to get there.
Yeah.
I had to get there.
That's right.
So I would love for our listeners and our viewers to understand what is social work. And I'm going to start off with this quote. I have a couple quotes that I loved in the book. This book was super easy to read and super easy to find answers to what I needed. I love how it's organized. It's ripe and ready for students. Students don't always want to read extra things, but this is something you can go straight to. And so here are a couple quotes. So on page 11, the bottom line of all the following information of this, because you described like demonstrating what social work is. If you're interested in therapy, you can do social work. If you're interested in social problems and the conditions that create problems for people, you can do social work. If you want to be an activist who organizes and actively disrupts harmful systems, you can do social work. So I really love that. Like, this degree enables you to quickly find a job doing exactly what you want and gives you greater flexibility in the workforce. I really like that it summed up what social work was, but social work is so vast. It's this huge umbrella of possibilities.
Yes.
So talk about that, like social work and the diversity within it. But I want you to specifically talk about psych and social work, because we both have undergrad psych degrees.
Yes.
So what happened? And I'll tell my story, but I want you to tell yours first.
Yeah. I think what I like about social work is that the core of social work is the value systems, and that's the part that draws people who are drawn to the mission of what we do, honoring the dignity of a person, looking at the whole environment, and wanting to help. So how you help people, that's the big question. I want to help. And I'm not sure where I want to help or in what modality. Social work gives you the flexibility to decide where you're going to land for a period of time. What makes us distinct from, say, psychology is I think within psychology, you have to stay there. I think once you pick a lane, you have to stay there. And the lane typically is, folks who are interested in the intra, like doing psychological services, or, for our folks who are LPCs, our cousins. They really do think about, how do I do therapy? And that's the classes and that's the journey, but it stops sort of there. For us, we can pivot and say, I really love this, but I'm interested in working in schools and doing therapy in schools. Or I'm actually feeling a little burned out by therapy, but I'm interested in management or like a whole different space. And so you can pivot with this job. And I've pivoted a lot.
Same here.
Yes.
I always say I have like 4 or 5 careers.
I have 1700s, yeah. I still kind of do.
Right. And I love it, though. I always say if Pitt decides they're tired of me and they put me out, I'm like, well, I'll just go back to my own practice and have therapy and
How
do that.
dare they?
But they won't. They love me and I love them.
Where she goes, I go.
That's right. So talk about I saw that. Talk about psych and social work.
Okay. So specifically, psych and social work. So with psychology, there's a section in the book that talks about what psychologists do and what social workers do. I will say this. Social workers can do what psychologists are able to do. Psychologists cannot do what social workers do, right? So with psychology, you really are thinking about the intra. What is the person thinking? How is the person adapting to their lives, right? Really focused on the one-on-one with the person. Social work says, I'm interested in that and some more, because a person does not show up by themselves in a space. I want to know where you live, who's your mama, who's your cousin, where do you attend, like what's going on with your environment, what's happening to your systems, because how you show up in a space is determined by all these other things. And I develop an intervention based on all of that, not just like, I don't feel good and I want to feel better. I'm interested in saying, I think there's some other things that I want to open up. And the other important part is social work trains you to be and do interventions in all those other spaces. Psychology works on interventions on like how you adjust and get psychological relief. But I don't know that it always does that around social contexts.
That's what I wanted y'all to get. That it's a distinction. And we can talk. I always feel like we have the right to talk because we have psych degrees. My story, I was in the psych program, and I met one of my closest friends, and she was in the psych program. Well, we went through the Bachelor's of Psych program together, and then we divided because I said, psychology was science, the study of the mind. I was interested in that, but I came from a family who were activists. We were marching. We were on the streets. I looked at poverty. I looked at a person in their environment, and I asked questions. I remember asking my very tall dad, he's 6'1", and looking up saying, "Dad, why is that person sleeping on the street? They could come stay with us. We got an extra room." And my dad was like, "I know, I said that stuff," like from this little itty bitty age. And I remember my dad having a smile and thinking like, okay, how am I going to explain this to her? But you could see it. And I don't know about you, but like when I was younger, I could feel people's pain.
Yeah.
I could feel it. I could see it on their face. And still to today, like if we go to a restaurant, oh my goodness, the waitress.
It's a lot. I know.
What's going on with you? You okay? You just feel it. Or we stop on a street, or we're on a bus or the subway asking about someone and feeling that. That's the kind of pull that we're talking about. But we're talking about that person in the environment and what is happening upon that person, what is causing the psychological disturbance. That's the difference. And that's a very big difference. You explained that so well. That's a very big difference for me. And I said, I need to go that way. Well, my friend continued to go in psychology, got her PsyD, and loved her life. And I went this way in social work, loving my life and loving all the different things that I've done.
I thought about a PsyD too.
Absolutely, I did. And that was the track I was going on. But I wanted to teach. I wanted to get through school a little quicker. I wanted to be a therapist and really look at social problems. And on the micro, meso, macro level, I was interested in all of those different levels. And so,
I don't know that stuff. Micro, meso.
Okay, so micro, individual, mesos, families, groups, macro, that's policy, research, that's agency, and the large community and community organizing. Shout out to all my community organizing social workers.
We need you right now.
Yeah, we need you so much. But there's so much to do, and I felt like, I don't have to sit at a desk, or I don't have to sit in a chair and just have client after client. I can do so many things. And I still love seeing clients. I returned back to seeing clients recently, and it's so much fun.
It's so fun.
It's so much fun because it's so wild that we hadn't shared that story, but you said the same exact thing that I said. I want to help people. That's how I started out. Yeah, and that's how students usually come to us. I want to help people.
How do I do that?
Yes. Now, I'm curious because there was a part in the book that I laughed out loud because I said, this is absolutely the reaction that I had too. What did your family say? Now, you have this professor and this, hi, Mom and Dad. I would like to be a social worker.
My poor parents. The jobs and the places I worked. So, we migrated here. My dad worked so hard so that I could work. And he said, I did all this so you could work in a jail? Like, he could, cannot compute. They loved my heart, but they were really worried about the places that I would work in and the neighborhoods I would go into. And, especially when we did community-based work. Because I would take my little car and my big box of toys. Remember how we always had a
bag,
a container, and a bag, and I'm going into that part of town, and I'm putting that in quotes. And so I think it felt to them more than the profession, like the locations. And I mean, when we go and look at people and their social conditions, what social work does is it's embedded. We go there, and so that part. That was always a challenge for them. So I think they're so relieved to see me in the academy. Oh my God.
I think you turned out just fine. But I'm going to tell you something. When I read this part in your book, okay, so I'm going to read it and then I'm going to share my parents' response. So, okay, page 14. Again, becoming a social worker.
Oh my God, what a good book.
For Dummies. I love the For Dummies brand because it's so easy to find what you need right away, and it really breaks it down. So I happen to love this brand. Okay, here we go, page 14. When I announced to my family that I wanted to pursue a degree and career in social work, they were apprehensive about my future because they had misconceptions about the profession. They thought I was a nice person, but worried that I was choosing a career where I would be poor and take children away from their families. I'm guessing that when you tell people that you're interested in social work, you might get a similar type of reluctant support. Let me tell you how reluctant
Isn't that nice wording?
my parents were, in particular, my high-achieving mama, my very successful parents were like, you're not going to have any money. Like, to my face, you're going to be broke. It's a depressing and dangerous type of profession. You're going to be taking kids away. That's all that they thought.
Nobody talks about the joy of the work.
Exactly. Now I want you to talk about the joy of the work, because those are myths. I'm going to get into the myths. That's on page 14 in the book. I love the myths because it's exactly what was said to me and to you, and we have totally different sets of parents. But when they said broke,
they look at their little daughters, their precious little jewels that are like, I choose. I think when people are thinking about the kind of work that we do, and this is part of the stigma of the populations we serve, nobody would say that for a doctor, right? Nobody would say that for even a psychologist or a community worker that doesn't have the name social worker. Lawyers. They would respond and say, my gosh, what a noble thing. Or teachers. I want to say teachers and nurses. Those are probably our colleagues. And so I think that it is difficult for us to get the kind of reception that we get. And when that happens, I think our job is to also be very articulate about who we are and be very proud of who we are. Because the joy and what we get to do, it's an honor. And the skills we have are so dope. I'm like, you want a social worker. We are the folks who have the unique training and the skills and the heart. So it's like all of that stuff to come in and help bring people together. We can assess, we can stay in the room with people, we can cry with people.
Absolutely.
Part of what I also talk about even in the kind of therapy that I do. My therapy is really non-hierarchical. I tell folks, I sit with folks and I spend time with them. It's not this neutral, we can't be real, like the assumption that you're coming into a sanitized space and I'm not a person and you're not a person. And that's because of the way I was trained as a social worker. And that's what I feel like I feel comfortable in the community.
Absolutely, because that's a lot of what we do. We make connections with our clients. We share their experiences. We bear witness to their pain. We hold their hand. We do things that we're like, throw that book out. We're going to make our own script, and this is what we do. We become family members. It's so awesome.
Social work is so creative.
Absolutely.
I have never seen a problem that I was like, oh, that's a fake problem. We got this.
Absolutely.
It's so fun.
It's so fun. And you can put so much creativity into it. You all know that I love music and singing, and so I incorporate drumming and singing and rhythm. I have a friend
that terrifies me, by the way. I will have none of that.
We're not going to have her sing today.
But what's interesting is we do similar kinds of work, but we each do it with our talents, right? And the clients that we see are having improvements, and we'd see tracking the same thing, but it's based on our talents and gifts.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's so fun. And so I even have students that are going to use theater or dance and instruments. There's music therapists, that are social workers, and art and all of these things. And I use art and play in therapy, and I'm still a social worker, and I love that. Yoga. I have all these friends that do these things. So I love it. I want to talk about the myths, because we have a lot of joy and we have a lot of pride in social work. And every time I talk about social work, every time I hear you talk about it, read in the book, I'm like, there is so much gratification and satisfaction in social work, and we're we're easily spreading that good news. So I want to talk about the myths, which one, you said, are you taking a vow of poverty?
Yeah.
Was one question in that chapter. And then removing children from their homes. Are we removing children? So I just want you to address those two things.
I also correct my students who say, I don't do this for the money. I'm like, pause. Your student loans certainly are like going screech. Wait, what's going to happen with me?
You actually have to pay someone.
Actually,
I'm going to pay with my joy.
I'm going to pay you in IOUs. Do you know? I want to really push forward the fact that social work is a profession. And a profession means that you're recognized for the public good that you do. We have a whole class on like, is social work a profession? This was a historical debate. And people decided that we were not specialized enough and that we were a vocation and volunteers. So,
I don't have pearls.
Right.
Clutch yours.
So as a result of that, there's the discipline of social work was created. And a discipline means that you are going to be compensated like a professional. And so I want to make sure that folks understand, whether you have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, there are good jobs that pay you. And they pay, either the job itself pays for it, also the benefits, and you're a public servant. And so part of what the myth is, like, I'm not going to make money. And I'll tell folks the pathways for what you can do and how much these jobs pay. That's in the book, in terms of understanding that you can have a life where you get to work and get compensated fairly, equitably. Now the jobs are offering bonuses. Can you imagine? I said, I'm sorry, how much is that bonus? We have a career fair every March Madness, and I'll go and talk to the employers, and sometimes I think about signing up for those UPMC jobs. I said, oh, you said LCSW? So licensure certainly increases your ability to negotiate and get more funding, but your investment in this education and in this degree, it is a myth that you're going to be poor and not be able to afford it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even at the bachelor's level, there's so many jobs that have opened up. That's the only thing.
They're paying really well.
They're paying really well. And, that's the only thing we can thank the doggone pandemic about. But there's such a need for social workers, and they're putting people in those positions that aren't social workers because there's not enough social workers.
True.
So there will not be a limit of job. You can also be a licensed bachelor social worker in the state of Pennsylvania. So those that are listening and watching in Pennsylvania, you can do that now, which actually I think it bumps you ahead, but you definitely can make more and have more responsibilities in your job.
Yep.
So,
and you and I both work on and work with nonprofits and serve on boards, and you hear how there's a shortage of employees all the time and job retentions because there's just a high need and compensation levels are going higher and higher,
right,
which we've been advocating for. So it's good for us to see it happen. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I say a lot to my students, as a social worker, because the umbrella is so big, you can have several different types of, I call them multiple streams of income. And so you can be an expert over here. You can do presentations on your expert topics. You could be a therapist. You can run an agency. There's so many different avenues that you do. You can write for a column. You can do assessments. Yes, assessments, so much. Supervision. So when you become LSW, LCSW, you can do those things. Bachelor level, you can run groups and write curriculum, and there's so much.
What can you not do?
Right. Come on, quit playing around.
You can't prescribe medication.
Okay, we can't do that. But that's it.
But
no one can except for psychiatrists and MDs. So we're back in the same boat.
Yes, I agree. And I think one of the things I encourage people to do is to specialize. The more specialized you are, the more training and niche areas you have, the more that those things can become funds of income for you. So people will look to you and say, can you do this part? So my friends who worked in school-based settings, for instance, and got their LCSWs would do home studies on the side. because adoption agencies always need a social worker to do home studies, or agencies would need folks who could just do work for per diem. So those are the kinds of things that you're like, oh, this ends up being some fun money for you on the side.
Independent contracting and all of that sort of thing.
Independent contracting.
Yeah. So my trauma background, we're both trauma experts in our trauma background. We study a lot of that. We can do talks on trauma, and we do contracts and, with folks, and just kind of making organizations and places trauma informed. And you wrote an article about that. So it's really, find your niche. If you work with children, if you work, with therapy dogs, if whatever your niche is, you can continue.
If you're a grant writer, right?
Oh,
so
yeah,
for macro
that's a big
folks,
deal.
if you're a grant writer, that's helpful. Or if you're an activist, people can also hire you to be parts of projects as you go along. The thing is, you need to ask for compensation. You don't need to do this stuff for free or because you love it. You need to ask folks, what's the compensation look like for the work that I'm doing? You have to know that that's worth and has value economically.
Absolutely.
And you have to come in the room like you have value. You can't walk around all, oh gosh, I'm like, this
Whatever you want to
whatever
give me
you
is
want.
okay.
You gotta be like, I'm trained.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so you have to come in with some authority.
Yeah. We're highly trained. So you start off, you have a bachelor's in social work, and then you get your MSW. And from there, you can get your LSW, which is the license. And then you sit for 3,000 hours clinical supervision, and then you can sit for your LCSW.
Yeah.
That is a lot, and it's rigorous, and it's not easy, but we are well trained, well informed, and well practiced. We get out there, and our interns, by the time you get all of that, you had about 3-4 internships, and an opportunity to have your hands and you in the trenches working with folks, getting to know how to do social work, what you want to do, what you don't want to do. It's a full learning experience. So when you're graduating, you're not feeling like you have Bambi legs. You have no idea what you're doing when you're out there. You're well trained.
That's why we felt so good. At 23, we're like, oh my gosh.
We know we talk
Do
about.
you know my notepad is full of nice information.
I do want to talk about, because we're putting on rose-colored glasses because we've been in the profession many years, double-digit years for us. You wrote a chapter on, and I love it, tough situations, because we're not trying to pretend that social work is just easy street and you're just drinking pina coladas and blowing bubbles every day. Like, absolutely not. There are tough situations.
Not like those LPCs.
Shout out to all my LPC family. I definitely want to talk about that. So you talked about, I know for me, child lining was just really difficult.
Yeah.
Still, I'm like, oh, you just have that ball in your stomach, and you know that you're doing what's right, or you think you know that you're doing what's right for the kid, and you second guess yourself, and then 2020 vision is, all of that, right? And you feel like, I don't know if I did the right thing. You talked about that experience, and so it was child lining, a child, and that whole choking situation. And so I just want you to just share with our listeners and our viewers what that situation was.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about that chapter. You're really breaking down tough situations and giving really good advice.
Yeah. So when you're working with a family and you're working with kids, I always say working with kids means you're working with the family. There's no kid that's divorced from their family. And so oftentimes people will bring you their kid to fix, right? Oh my gosh, Johnny's, that's no good. Please help us. And what you find is that there is family dynamics. Kids do not sprout by themselves, right? And so there's a whole host of things. And in this case, this was a family that had adopted some girls, and the girls were acting out. Particularly one of the girls who was a teenager was missing school. You know, the things that drive parents crazy. Missing school, and just kind of doing all of the things that were making them worried. And so I'm working with her, and she gets aggressive. And so she is telling me what happened in a particular situation, and she said her mother, they got into a fight. She was having a fight with her mom, and her mother had got to her. She got mouthy, and she pinned her up against a wall and choked her.
Whoa.
And said, "You say that one more time," right? So it was a pretty pretty intense situation, and then she shrugged it off as though it was no big deal. Right? So it's a typical fight. People will describe things to you in passing that you're like,
hang on
a second.
You got Chuck.
That's when I close the notebook. Right?
Yeah.
So I knew at that moment, given the family dynamics, that I had to report it. But if I report it, I knew that the family wouldn't come back. Because the idea was that this girl was a liar and that she was doing things to get attention and that she would be manipulating me. I was like, I could see the mom saying all of this, but I also knew if I don't report it and if we don't talk about it, it's, first of all, it's illegal, but the other part was that I don't know if she's going to be better off because I reported it, because I'm not here to sort of monitor and help them through this. So yeah, making decisions like that when you feel like it's already a precarious situation and that choice may not lead to more safety immediately, but a cutoff.
Yeah, and people, especially I hear students, but I hear even seasoned social workers say, I'm afraid that the family won't come back. I'm afraid that I'm going to lose them as a client. And like you said, I won't be able to monitor if the kid's okay. All of that is valid, and it's a point, and we hear you, we empathize. But I tell you what, when your head hits the pillow, you can't be worrying if that kid is safe.
Yeah.
And our number one responsibility.
Or the next time it happens and the child dies, right?
Yeah. That's something we couldn't live with.
Right.
So you have to report it. But that, I think every single class I teach, I get that question. We talk about ethical dilemmas, and I say, you planted seeds in that family, and if they don't come back, those seeds are still planted, and someone else is going to water it, and someone else is going to be the sunshine. Someone else will be able to see the fruits, but we're just the seed planter in this situation, and that's okay. A seed planter is the way that you get growth.
I have a client now who was telling me that she reported something that she was being harmed by her mom to the counselor, and the counselor, instead of childlining it, because this was a black family, told the sister of her mother and said, hey, I just want to make you aware this is what happened. Didn't report it, and she got in more trouble at home. She felt the least safe, and she's like, I've never felt like anybody had my back. The system didn't work for me.
Wow.
Right? And so those are the things we have to get real about the implications, the racial implications for reporting and what it means to which families, right? Why people choose not to. But you think about what that means.
Yeah. We have to protect our children. We have to protect our older population. That we take an oath. We have our code of ethics, and our code of ethics goes on. Just to quote a few, like, we treat folks with dignity and respect, okay? Folks isn't in there, but that's what I put in there. And we give folks self-determination, but we take a vow, to protect folks, to give people, marginalized folks, a platform. We say, oh, you won't hear them, you'll hear me, and then we make a path, and sometimes it's good trouble, but we make a path for those that would otherwise not be heard. That's really important. I tell you that this part, this quote in the book had me cracking up, because what people think, and I hope that as you're listening and watching, you're saying, oh, I didn't know social workers were all of that and they did all that. But I will tell you what social workers are not. And I thought this was so funny. This is in chapter 9, page 341. Are social worker jobs all about shuffling papers at your desk while eating a burger? Maybe the job switches it up sometimes, and you get to shuffle papers, eat burgers, and drink big sodas in your car while smoking. That was hilarious. Because people have this
that's
in
what
their
they
mind.
do in movies. Have you ever seen a happy social worker in a movie?
No.
It's always some social worker whose clothes never fit them. It's not even about the size. It's always that like somebody who's disgruntled, who is upset, and who burnt out,
crinkly and crackly and run down and
wearing sensible shoes.
cardigans. Oh, shoot, I got a cardigan on today.
Hey, that part's true.
There's this series, I think it's called The Maid, and it was on Netflix. And they depicted a social worker in that series so accurate and so well, because that social worker, although she was rough around the edges, she's a little crusty around the edges, she cared so much about the woman in the family that she was servicing. And then they showed another social worker further down the line when, and I hate, spoiler alert, but when she went to live in a shelter, that social worker was so empathic and caring and compassionate. And so I said, that's who we are, and we're everywhere. Everywhere this young lady went, she had a social worker to kind of uplift her and be that bridge, and that connection to other services and to help her get on her feet. And eventually that's exactly what she did, to where she was self-sufficient and strong and powerful in her own. So I love that, because that was really funny, and I could picture the big gulp sitting there. So I want you to talk about just some of the jobs, and it's not that picture that we just had, but chapter 19 talks about, this is my favorite chapter, although
it was fun to write.
I kept going back because I think a couple chapters were my favorite, but this is one of my favorite, the jobs. And we already talked about job security, but 10 jobs you didn't know social workers could do. Super fun. So I want you to just throw out a couple jobs that maybe they didn't think that they could do, and understand, viewers and listeners, there are so many more.
Oh, yeah.
So go there.
Okay, so what's fun about my job in academia is that we get to think about what kind of social workers we're making and then where they'll end up. And so we get to hear where folks are all the time. And so some of this was based on what are my students doing right now? And the other is also thinking about what's everyone doing across the lifespan. So I thought about where in different phases of people's lives, whether you're intervening with kids or adolescents or young adults or older folks. So I thought about jobs along that.
Great.
And then I thought about specializations. Maybe you're going to work within area of addiction. Maybe you're going to be doing hospital work. But I also thought, I think there's some really cool jobs people don't know that social workers do. So I would say that animal-assisted therapy. I don't think that folks know that animal social work is a big growing area. And so this is where you will use non-humans, is what they're called, by the way. There's called species, human species, and non-human species. I said, animal people. So it's this notion that you will use non-humans as part of your work, and it can be whether they're helping you with an intervention or they're part of the milieu. And so thinking about what that looks like, I think most people will think about maybe a use of a pet or an animal in a therapeutic space, but it's not limited to that. So I thought that was interesting. Sports social worker. Yes. This is very hot. Okay, and so this is the part where there's a lot of folks who are who are athletes and who will need help navigating what it means to be an athlete, what it means to be a professional, and who may need therapeutic services. So a lot of times you'll see the sports team will have a sports psychologist, but they would have a social worker in that space because we could do that. And so you could do, and also using sports as an intervention. That's actually one of the oldest forms of social work. They used to have recreational social work, and so it was that kids would be allowed to play and the use of play as an intervention. So I thought that was fun.
Yes.
A commissioner, officer in the Air Force.
Wow.
Yes. So you could actually become an officer, and you'd have to go to officer school. I'm sure that's not the name of it. But what happens is you can enlist, and then there'll be training for you to become part of military personnel. And so social workers and psychologists are folks who can live on different bases, and you apply for that. Wow. So you have to pass your physical exam, officer school, and then also talk about then do your specialization. So you tend to do a lot of family work within that space. That's pretty competitive.
Super competitive. Did y'all know that?
But because you could be in the Air Force. I said, you can travel, you get all these benefits. People are so happy that I've heard that do this.
So I love that chapter because there was, I've been a social worker double-digit years. I said, you can? What? On and on and on.
Yeah.
I tell folks that say, I know I want to help people. I want to make a difference. And I say, this is how I advise folks. If you get up in the morning, you get to go to work and do what you love to do. What does that look like? Then we say, this is where you fit it in. You can do it under social work. I love that.
International social work is the other one.
Oh, that's a big one.
Right. So you can actually think about working in other areas that aren't U.S. based, and so you'll have to think about what social work looks like internationally and what kind of licensure you need. You have to be pretty strategic. If you're thinking about leaving, you have to understand what it means for you, what the language barriers are, how you do that. But there's a lot of social workers that are doing humanitarian work.
Absolutely.
So that's really cool.
There's a lot of work. And it's fascinating. You get to do the things you love, and that's so fulfilling as well.
Yeah.
So one of your last chapters was chapter 20, and you talked about taking care of ourselves because we do so many different things. A lot of times we are, so compassionate that we become fatigued. And so there is a such thing as compassion satisfaction, and that's a big deal. And it really, for me, outweighs a lot of the fatigue. I want you to just leave us with some tips. Leave our social workers. I'm talking about the spring, the fall, the summer, and the winter social workers, the seasoned and the unseasoned social workers. Leave us with some of the tips that you have longevity in the profession. So leave us with some tips on how we can take care of ourselves and not burn out in the profession.
Yes. Okay. So everyone, this is for everyone. In general, you have to have enough water. You have to eat a balanced meal, okay? So no matter how busy you get and whatever is happening to you, take a minute and drink some water and have a rhythm to your day. Have a time you start, have a break for lunch you have to eat. Step outside for a minute. So for folks who are like, I'm so hurried, and what's happening right now is people's jobs there's multiple roles, there's less money, there's more stress. And so when you tell them, oh, make sure you incorporate and get yoga, they want to really throw that yoga ball at you. But what I will say to folks is, please make sure that you are doing the physical part of taking care of yourself. So that's one. The other, for young folks that are coming out, what we know and what the research shows is that you need good supervision.
Yes.
That is essential.
Absolutely.
I don't know that folks frame it as self-care, but good supervision is critical to your longevity.
Absolutely.
Yes. So good
100%.
Supervision is important. For folks in the middle, what you want to think about is you want to specialize. I think that also helps in terms of thinking about, so the other part of self-care is additional training. You can become really stagnant. And I don't know that people think about psychological or educational or dreaming as self-care. So think about what you want to do, what you dream of, and fuel that part of you. Especially if you're sort of in the middle and feeling like, I'm not sure what I want to do. I'm kind of tired of some of this. It's like, go have some fun and think about that part.
Nice.
And then for my seasoned folks who've been doing this for a minute, one of the things you all need to do is you have to go play.
Yes.
So the idea of play is that you are a whole person. You're not just your job. Don't talk about your job all the time.
That's right.
Go be interesting and interested. And so make sure that you are fueling all parts of you. And so I think if you tend to your whole person, for folks who are managers or who are directors or people who can impact policy, there's a lot of talk about self-care on the individual level, but what managers need to do is pay people more and give them some time off.
That's right.
That's it. I don't want to hear.
You heard it.
I think you can't be a social worker. And I was involved in this where I would go and do these very sort of individualized self-care plans. But what the literature shows and what people say is all these wellness programs don't matter if people aren't getting paid enough and if they're not resting. And so that's what we have to do as folks who can influence that.
Yes.
Is that you got to give your people some time off, and you got to give them, you show appreciation by compensating them well.
Yes. I heard everyone clapping. out there. Those
That's
are
right.
wonderful tips. And to me, those are unique tips that you don't hear all the time. So I appreciated hearing those today. Dr. Betru, it's been too much fun. I can't
Dr.
believe our time
Jones.
is I can't believe our time is
Thank you,
up.
thank you.
If you want to get a copy, well, you do. I'm just going to tell you, you do want to get a copy of this. Becoming a Social Worker for Dummies by Dr. Yodit Betru. You can get this on, well, this is my copy, and I have to have you sign it after this. I know you're going to be
I'm
like,
going to use
what?
a big marker.
I want a big marker in the smiley face. But you can get this on Amazon. I got mine in, I have Amazon Prime, so I got it in literally 24 hours. And I read it in a couple days. It was super easy to read, and it was very informative. So you can get it on Amazon. Click that link below. It's provided for you. Easy. Go right to the book. And it's very affordable. So I like that too.
Thank you so much.
It wasn't a super expensive book. I like that. If you want to be a social worker, or you think you might want to be a social worker, listen, this is called Healing Overflow with Dr. Toy's Social Work Podcast. So you come to the right place. If you want to become a MSW, you already have an undergrad degree, whether it be in psych or social work or anything like that, you can go to msw.pitt.edu for all the information that you need. Our admission department is, they're excellent. They work with folks and they help you through the whole process. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say, our curriculum is amazing. The thing I'm really proud of, there's a lot of options people have for where you get your degree, and that's a personalized decision for you. But I will say, how we talk about social work, you see the framing that we have and the kind of justice-oriented lens that we have to social work. That's what we have in our curriculum. So
yes,
Pitt's curriculum is one of the best. I'm pretty proud of us.
Well, I can attest to that because my MSW is from the University of Pittsburgh.
How about that?
So.
This is one of our products.
Thank you. Oh no, please stop. So I can say, I can sign my name on that line. If you want to get a bachelor's in social work, I'm the director of the BASW program, so I'm the person to talk to. You can directly email me, toyaj@pitt.edu, and sometimes y'all know how I forget my email, so I got it right that time. I'm always like, toyaj@pitt.edu. I got it right. I had to look to make sure. I said, yes. And let me know, hey, I'm interested in the BASW program. I'd like some more information. We have information sessions. We have individual meetings. You can meet with us. We're super accessible. Like, you can just email us and meet with us. We're happy to do that. We'll give you a mini tour of social work if you're down on campus. We're happy to do that as well. So let us know. Always, don't forget, if you have a question for the Ask a Therapist segment, you can click that link below, the Qualtrics link, go into the anonymous survey. Only leave your email if you want that Starbucks gift card. If your question is read on the podcast, I will make sure you get your latte.
I love Ask a Therapist segment.
It's so fun.
That's a good question. Oh, that's a nice answer. I'll get my notepad out. It's nice. It's really
super
good.
Juicy, super fun.
It's so good.
And so I can't wait. I've been seeing some questions coming through. I'm really excited to read them. So thank you for that. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And most importantly, thank you for sharing, because as you heal, your healing overflows onto everyone around you. Thank you so much, Dr. Betru.
Thank you, Dr. Jones.
All right.
Thank you, folks.
See y'all next time. Bye-bye. You know what, Dr. Betru, before we go, I know we said all of our goodbyes, but I'm feeling generous today. I think that one of our viewers or listeners needs a copy of this book. If you resonated with what we said and you said, I want to learn more and I want to read more, you will have a chance to win a copy of this book. Is that okay?
That sounds good to me. Happy to share the love.
All right. Wonderful. So when you share, I will pick randomly someone and I will announce the winner, and I will send you your copy of Becoming a Social Worker. It's yours. How about that? So be sure to share, and I'll be after you with your free copy. Thanks, y'all. Again, see you later.